You are listening to Zen Sleeping Stories, a 1-hour collection of gentle, original tales inspired by Zen and Buddhist wisdom. These stories are made for quiet nights, for tired minds, and for hearts that have carried too much through the day. This video contains 7 stories. Each one is slow and soft. Each one is complete on its own. You do not need to remember anything. You do not need to follow every sentence. If your attention drifts, that is natural. If you fall asleep during the first story, that is perfectly fine. If you wake for a moment later and hear a line from another story, that is also fine. There is nothing here to catch up on. At the beginning of each part, I will gently say the story's title, so even a new listener can know where they are without effort. These are not lessons to study and not ideas to hold tightly. They are like quiet lanterns along a path, simple, steady, and unhurried. Now we begin part 1. This story is called The Lantern That Needed No Flame. Long ago, in a mountain valley where the air smelled of pine and riverstone, there was a village that lived by daylight and rested by night. The houses were small and close together. Smoke from evening cooking rose in thin lines and disappeared into the darkening blue. Dogs curled beside doorways. Children's voices, bright a moment ago, softened and faded as night arrived. A narrow footpath led from the village to the fields and the hillside homes beyond. In the morning, it was easy to see. Sunlight poured over the stones, and the stream beside it flashed like a ribbon. But at night, the path became a quiet shadow. It did not become dangerous. It simply became less clear, less outlined, as if the world was letting its edges go. At the start of this path stood a wooden post, and hanging from it was an old lantern. It was not the kind of lantern that promised brightness. It had no glass. It had no oil. There was no wick waiting to be lit. It was an empty frame of wood and thin metal, shaped like a lantern and treated like a lantern, yet it carried no flame at all. It swayed a little when the wind visited. Sometimes rain tapped on it. In winter, snow rested on its roof like a small white cap. In summer, moths drifted around it, puzzled by the absence of light, then flew away. The lantern never changed. Travelers noticed it for the first time and often stopped. They would lift their heads and look into its emptiness. Some laughed quietly, not unkindly, and said to themselves, "A lantern with no flame. What is this for?" Some shook their heads and continued walking. Some, after a long day, glanced at it and felt strangely comforted, though they could not say why. The villagers told different stories about how it came to be there. One said it was left by an old craftsman who loved making beautiful things, even if they served no clear purpose. Another said a monk passing through had hung it there to remind people that not everything needs to be fixed. Another said it had always been there, as natural as the trees. No one truly knew. And after a while, no one needed to know. Night after night, people walked past it. Some came home from the fields with tired bodies and quiet satisfaction. Some returned from the market with baskets that felt heavier than they should. Some carried worry like a stone in the chest, though their hands were empty. Some carried words they wished they had not said, and some carried words they wished they had. Others carried nothing but the simple wish to lie down and disappear into sleep. They passed under the lantern's shadow, and the path continued. At first, people relied on what they could see. They looked down, searching for the safest stones. They held their breath when the path darkened beneath trees. They walked stiffly, as if darkness were an argument they needed to win. Yet the lantern offered no help. So gradually, without anyone announcing it, something softened. A woman who often hurried began to slow her steps. A man who always clenched his jaw found it loosening. A young traveler who disliked uncertainty stopped demanding that every corner of the path be visible. The darkness remained, but it stopped feeling like an enemy. It became more like a blanket laid gently over the world. One evening, a traveler arrived in the village for the first time. He was young, carrying a worn bag and a mind full of restless thoughts. He had walked all day and listened to the sound of his own worries the whole way. His feet ached, but his mind refused to rest. He asked for a place to sleep, and a family offered him a small room with a mat and a bowl of warm broth. Later, when the village grew quiet, the traveler stepped outside. The night air cooled his face. He could not sleep. He decided to walk along the path for a while, as if movement might calm the thoughts that had gathered inside him. When he reached the lantern, he stopped. He tilted his head and looked up. It was truly empty. Not broken, not forgotten. Simply empty, as though emptiness were its true design. He felt irritation rise in him, the way it often did when life did not match his expectations. He whispered, "Why are you here if you do not shine?" The lantern said nothing. It creaked softly, just once, as the wind moved through. The traveler waited, as if the lantern might suddenly become useful, but nothing happened. The night remained dark. The path remained uncertain. He exhaled longer than he meant to. Then he began walking. At first, his steps were careful. He looked down, trying to map the stones in his mind, but he could not hold the map. The darkness kept changing, and his mind kept chasing the next place to look. Then something else happened. He heard the stream beside the path. It was not loud. It was steady. It did not worry about where it was going. It simply moved. The traveler let the sound reach him, and for a moment he stopped fighting the night. He noticed the smell of wet earth. He noticed the coolness of the air on his hands. He noticed that the trees did not demand to be seen. They stood quietly, as if they trusted the darkness. His feet found the ground. His body, older than his thoughts, knew how to walk. The traveler realized he could move without certainty. He could continue without holding a perfect picture in his head. He could let the next step reveal itself when it arrived. And in that realization, something inside him loosened. He walked farther than he planned. He turned back without panic. When he returned to the village, the lantern still hung at the path's beginning, empty and calm. For the first time that day, he felt tired in a gentle way, not a sharp way. He lay down and slept. Days passed. The traveler remained in the village for a while, helping with small tasks, listening to the quiet life around him. At night, he sometimes walked to the lantern again, not because he expected it to light the path, but because something about its emptiness felt honest. One night, it began to rain. The first drops were delicate, then the rain thickened into a steady curtain. The traveler walked anyway, letting the sound of the rain replace the sound of his thoughts. The lantern was dark, and the path was dark, and yet the world felt softer, as if the rain was smoothing the surface of everything. He stood under the lantern and watched water drip from its edges. He laughed once, quietly, and the laugh did not carry bitterness. It carried relief. A few weeks later, winter arrived. Snow fell slowly, the way snow falls when it is not trying to impress anyone. It covered the path and softened every stone. The traveler walked at dusk and saw the lantern wearing a small crown of snow. Above it, the moon appeared, pale and patient. The path was still not lit, but the snow held a faint glow from the moon. Not enough to turn night into day, but enough to make the darkness feel gentle, like a room with the curtains drawn. The traveler understood something then, not as a lesson, but as a quiet settling. The lantern was not there to fight the dark. It was there to make peace with it. It did not push brightness into the night. It did not argue with shadows. It simply stood at the beginning of the path, as if to say, without words, "You can walk without forcing the world to be different. You can move without demanding certainty. You can rest without solving everything." People began to speak of the lantern differently, not with jokes, not with confusion, but with a kind of quiet respect. When visitors asked why it was empty, villagers would shrug and smile. Some said, "It reminds us to walk gently." Others said, "It reminds us the night is not wrong." A child once asked, "Why don't we light it?" An older woman answered, "Because then we would forget what it teaches." The child frowned, thinking hard, then ran off to chase a rolling apple down the road, satisfied for the moment with not knowing. And the lantern remained. In spring, birds nested in the nearby branches. In summer, the path smelled of grass and warm stone. In autumn, leaves fell and turned the ground into quiet gold. In each season, the lantern stayed the same, empty, present, unhurried. As years passed, many people came and went. Some grew old, some were born, some traveled far and returned. The lantern watched them all without holding them. Those who walked beneath it learned something simple. The mind loves to light everything up. It loves to name, to plan, to predict. But life is often a dark path, and not because something is wrong. The dark path is simply the way night is. The dark path is where rest begins. On nights when worries felt loud, people walked past the lantern and remembered they did not need to make the night bright. They only needed to keep walking gently, one step at a time, until home appeared. And sometimes, home was not a place at all. Sometimes home was the moment the shoulders lowered, the moment the jaw softened, the moment the heart stopped insisting that everything be understood. Sometimes home was the simple truth that you can be here in the dark and still be safe. So the lantern still hangs there at the edge of the village at the beginning of the path. It holds no flame, and yet it offers something that cannot be burned out. Permission. Permission to let the world be dim. Permission to let thoughts be incomplete. Permission to stop trying to see the whole road at once. In the village, there was an unspoken habit. When someone felt overwhelmed, they did not always speak about it. They might simply take a slow walk at dusk, stop beneath the lantern, and stand there for a few breaths. Not to do anything special, not to change anything, just to be held by the ordinary night. Then they would turn back, as if they had set down a small bundle they did not need to carry into sleep. As this first story comes to a quiet pause, you do not need to hold on to it. If your mind is awake, it may keep listening. If your mind is already drifting, it may drift. The lantern does not chase you, and neither do these words. Now the second story is called The Old Well at the Edge of the Village. At the far edge of a quiet village, beyond the last cluster of houses and the final garden fence, there stood an old stone well. It was not hidden, yet it was rarely noticed. The main road curved away before reaching it, and most people had little reason to walk so far unless they truly wanted silence. The well had been there longer than anyone could remember. Its stones were smooth and rounded, shaped by countless seasons of rain and sun. Moss gathered in the crevices, and a simple wooden roof leaned gently over its opening, as if bowing with age. The rope was thick and rough, and the bucket bore the marks of many hands. Closer to the center of the village, newer wells had been built. They were easier to reach and surrounded by conversation. Water was drawn quickly there, accompanied by voices, laughter, and the sounds of daily life. The old well, by contrast, stood alone. Most days, no one came. Yet the well was never dry. Deep beneath its opening, clear water rested in quiet darkness. It did not rush. It did not sparkle. It simply remained, waiting. Children sometimes wandered near it when they were bored, tossing small stones into its depths and listening for the distant sound of water. Travelers passed it without stopping, unaware that anything worth noticing stood nearby. Even villagers who lived closest to it rarely visited, except on certain days when something felt unsettled inside them. These days were not marked on any calendar. They were days when the air felt heavy, though the sky was clear. Days when words spoken in the morning lingered too long. Days when worries multiplied quietly without asking permission. On those days, a few villagers would find themselves walking toward the edge of the village without quite knowing why. They did not hurry. When they reached the well, they often paused before leaning over its stone rim. At first, they saw only darkness. The openings seemed to hold nothing, as if it were empty. If the wind stirred, the surface of the water far below would ripple. Reflections shattered. The darkness moved. But if they waited just long enough, the ripples faded. The water grew still again, and when it did, it reflected everything clearly. The open sky, the drifting clouds, the face looking down. Nothing was added, nothing was removed. One evening, a woman came to the well after a long day that had left her restless. She had spoken too much, listened too little, and carried a feeling she could not name. Her steps slowed as she approached, as if the ground itself were asking her to pause. She leaned over the stone rim and exhaled. The water below trembled at first, disturbed by her movement and breath. Her reflection broke into fragments. The sky dissolved into shifting shapes. She watched without trying to change it. She did not tell the water to be still. She did not turn away when it failed to reflect clearly. She simply remained, hands resting on the cool stone. Gradually, the ripples softened. The water settled on its own. Her reflection returned, steady and whole. The sky rested quietly inside the well. she felt something ease, not because a problem had been solved, but because nothing needed to be solved. The old well did not respond. It did not reward her patience. It did not speak or explain. It remained exactly as it had been before she arrived. And yet, when she finally stepped away, she felt lighter. Word spread quietly about the well, not through announcements or stories, but through small changes in behavior. When someone seemed troubled, another might suggest a walk toward the edge of the village. No one said why. People who visited the well often returned, changed in subtle ways. Their voices softened. Their movements slowed. Their eyes seemed less burdened by what they had been carrying. They did not claim the well had power. They said only that it was quiet. A man who often hurried came one afternoon, pacing as if chased by his own thoughts. He leaned over the well and frowned when he saw nothing but darkness. He waited only a moment before stepping back, disappointed. He returned the next day. This time, he stayed longer. He watched the water shift and settle. He noticed how his own breathing slowed as he waited. When the reflection returned, he felt foolish for how quickly he usually turned away from things that asked for patience. After that, he came often, not to look at the water, but to stand beside it. Seasons passed. In spring, blossoms drifted into the well's opening, floating briefly before sinking out of sight. In summer, insects hovered above it, tracing slow patterns in the air. In autumn, leaves gathered on the stone rim, bright against the grey. In winter, frost traced quiet lines across the wood. Through it all, the well remained unchanged. It did not gather stories. It did not remember faces. It did not care who came or why. And yet, it offered something rare. Depth without demand. Those who leaned over it learned something without being taught. The surface of the water responded to every movement, every breath, every hurry. It showed how easily disturbance appeared, but beneath that surface, depth remained untouched. The well did not create stillness. It revealed it. A child once asked why the water looked different every time they came. An older villager answered, "Because we are different each time." The child nodded, satisfied, and dropped a pebble into the well, watching the ripples spread and fade. On evenings when the village felt too loud, the well waited. On mornings when life felt heavy before it began, the well waited. It did not promise peace, but it did not deny it either. It simply remained available. You do not need to go to the well. You do not need to picture it clearly. Like the water beneath its stones, quiet depth remains even when the surface of the mind moves. As this story settles, nothing needs to be held. The next story will come gently in its own time. This third story is called The Monk Who Listened to the Rain. On a gentle hillside not far from any town worth naming, there stood a small wooden temple. It was simple in its shape and modest in its presence, built from pale boards that had softened in color over many seasons. The roof sloped low and wide, allowing rain to fall freely from its edges. The door was usually open, not as an invitation, but because it felt natural that way. A single monk lived there. Those who passed by sometimes noticed him sitting near the doorway, still as a stone that had learned patience. He was not known for long talks or memorable sayings. He did not gather people around him. If asked a question, he answered briefly, kindly, and without urgency. Most of the time, he listened. The temple stood where the hill met a line of trees. Beyond them, fields opened wide. Wind traveled easily there. Weather arrived without warning. Clouds gathered and drifted apart again, as if practicing their own quiet breathing. One afternoon, the air changed. The sky dimmed slowly and without drama. Clouds layered themselves gently, one over another, until the light softened and the colors of the world faded into quieter shades. The monk sat near the doorway, hands resting loosely, eyes neither searching nor closed. The first drops of rain touched the ground lightly. Leaves accepted them without protest. Dust darkened and disappeared. The sound was barely there at first, more suggestion than sound. Then the rain deepened. It fell steadily, touching the roof, the earth, the trees, and the monk's robe alike. The wooden boards darkened as they absorbed the water. Small streams formed along the ground, finding their own paths without instruction. The monk did not move. He did not reach for the door. He did not adjust his posture. He did not change his breathing. He listened. The rain did not arrive with purpose. It did not ask to be understood. It fell as rain does, sometimes gently, sometimes with more weight, sometimes pausing briefly before returning again. The sound filled the space around the temple, but it did not crowd it. It made no demands. It simply was. Villagers passing along the distant path noticed the rain first, then noticed the monk. They slowed their steps slightly, surprised to see him sitting so close to the edge, unbothered by the weather. One person called out, half joking, half concerned, "Will you not close the door?" The monk smiled softly, but did not answer. The rain continued. As the afternoon passed, the sound changed. Sometimes the rain struck the roof in even rhythms. Sometimes it scattered, quick and light. Sometimes it seemed to fade almost entirely, only to return moments later with renewed presence. The monk listened to each change without preference. Memories drifted through his mind, as they often do when the world grows quiet. Faces from long ago, words once spoken and forgotten. Moments that had once felt important and now felt distant. He did not push them away. He did not invite them closer. They appeared, lingered briefly, and passed, like the rain moving through different patterns. The sound of the rain carried no story. It did not remind him of anything specific. It did not call up regret or longing. It was simply sound, arriving and leaving without attachment. Inside the temple, nothing waited to be protected. There were no scrolls that feared dampness, no precious objects that needed covering. The monk had arranged his life so that weather could pass through it without resistance. The rain fell more heavily for a time, filling the space with a steady presence. The monk noticed how his own breathing aligned with it, not deliberately, but naturally. Inhale, exhale, drop after drop. Hours passed this way without being counted. As the rain softened again, the air changed. The scent of wet earth rose gently. Leaves glistened. The ground absorbed what it needed and released the rest. When the rain finally stopped, there was no clear moment when it ended. The sound thinned until it was no longer there. Silence returned, not suddenly, but as if it had been waiting patiently behind the rain all along. The monk remained seated. The world felt open, rinsed, and spacious. The hills seemed to breathe. Birds returned to branches. The light grew clearer, though softer than before. Only then did the monk rise. He stood quietly, closed the door without sound, and stepped inside. Those who passed by later spoke of the rain, not of the monk. But some carried the image of him sitting there, listening, into their own homes. In the days that followed, people visited the temple for different reasons. Some came with questions, some came with restlessness, some came simply because the path led them there. When asked about the rain, the monk said little. One person asked, "What did you hear in the rain?" The monk thought for a moment and replied, "The rain." Another asked, "Did it teach you something?" The monk smiled and said, "It passed." Not everyone understood. Not everyone needed to. One evening, a young visitor arrived who had traveled far and carried a heaviness he could not explain. He stayed at the temple for a night, restless and unable to sleep. In the early hours, rain returned, light but persistent. The young visitor watched the monk sit by the open doorway again, listening. Curious, he sat nearby. At first, his mind raced. He noticed every sound, every discomfort. The rain felt loud. The silence between drops felt unsettling. But as time passed, his attention shifted. The sound of rain became less something to focus on and more something to be with. His thoughts slowed, then scattered, then softened. He did not feel calm in a dramatic way. He felt ordinary. And in that ordinariness, something loosened. When the rain ended, the young visitor stood quietly and bowed, not out of obligation, but because it felt like the right shape for the moment. He left without asking questions. Seasons continued to turn. Rain returned many times, sometimes brief, sometimes lasting through the night. Each time, the monk listened. He did not seek meaning in it. He did not assign lessons to its patterns. He did not hold on to the quiet it left behind. He simply allowed what arrived to arrive and what left to leave. The temple aged slowly. Wood faded. Boards creaked softly. The monk aged too, though it was difficult to say how much, as his presence seemed unchanged. People learned something without being taught. They learned that not every sound needs interpretation, that not every emotion needs explanation, that listening does not always lead to understanding, and that this is not a failure. Sometimes, listening is enough. On evenings when worries felt heavy, villagers remembered the monk sitting in the rain. They remembered that sound could pass through without being grasped. They remembered that silence was not something to create, but something that returns when allowed. The rain did not solve anything. It did not promise peace. It simply fell, touched everything, and moved on. And the monk listened. As this story rests here, there is nothing you need to hold. Like the rain, thoughts may come and go. Like the quiet after rain, space may return on its own. The next story will arrive gently when it is time. This story is called The Mountain That Did Not Move. Beyond the valley and past the quiet fields, there rose a mountain that most people noticed only in passing. It was not the tallest peak in the region, nor the most dramatic. Its slopes were broad and steady, its outlines simple against the sky. It did not draw attention to itself, and perhaps because of that, it was always there. From the village below, the mountain appeared the same each day. Morning light brushed its sides gently. Clouds gathered and drifted away. Shadows shifted, lengthened, and disappeared. Through all of it, the mountain remained unmoved. Children pointed to it when learning directions. Farmers checked the weather by watching how clouds touched its peak. Travelers used it as a marker, a quiet companion that told them where they were without saying a word. Few people climbed it. Not because it was difficult, but because it seemed complete as it was. It did not invite conquest. It did not promise revelation. It simply stood. At the foot of the mountain lived a small community. Their lives were ordinary and full, filled with planting and harvesting, speaking and listening, beginning and ending. When disagreements arose, voices sometimes carried farther than they should. When loss arrived, it stayed longer than anyone wanted. Through it all, the mountain watched. One year, a season of unrest settled over the village. It arrived quietly, without a clear reason. Small misunderstandings grew into longer silences. Old stories resurfaced. People felt unsettled, as if the ground beneath their routines had shifted, even though nothing visible had changed. During that time, villagers often found themselves looking toward the mountain. It was still there. A young man named Ren lived near the edge of the village. He was thoughtful by nature, quick to feel, and slow to let go. When conflict touched his life, it lingered. Words spoken once replayed themselves in his mind many times. He searched for responses he had not given, explanations he had not offered. Sleep came unevenly to him during those months. One evening, as the sun lowered and the air cooled, Ren found himself walking toward the mountain without deciding to. His feet followed a familiar path that gradually became less familiar. Grass grew thicker, sounds softened. The village fell behind him. He reached the mountain's base as night approached. Up close, it felt larger than it looked from a distance, not imposing, but present. The ground beneath it was firm and cool. Ren placed a hand against the stone and felt nothing extraordinary, only solidity. He sat down. At first, his thoughts followed him. He replayed conversations. He imagined future ones. He tried to organize what he felt, but the effort only tangled it further. The mountain did not respond. Wind passed along its face. Leaves rustled nearby. Somewhere, an animal moved quietly through the undergrowth. Ren noticed his breathing. It was shallow at first, uneven. He did not try to change it. He simply noticed. As time passed, his breath deepened on its own. His shoulders lowered slightly. The tightness in his jaw softened. The mountain remained still. Ren realized that the mountain did not agree with him. It did not disagree. It did not offer reassurance or correction. It simply existed, unmoved by his unrest. And somehow that steadiness made room for his own movement. He stayed until the stars appeared, then returned home without ceremony. That night, he slept more deeply than he had in weeks. In the days that followed, others began to walk toward the mountain as well. Not in groups, not as a practice, just one by one, when something inside them felt too restless to stay contained. A woman whose grief had followed her for years sat at the mountain's edge and cried without explanation. The mountain did not comfort her, but it did not turn away. Her tears came and went. She returned home quieter, though her grief remained. An older man who carried anger like a shield leaned against the stone and spoke aloud to no one. His voice rose, then fell. When he finished, the mountain had not changed, but his anger felt less sharp, as if it had found somewhere to rest. Children played nearby, climbing small rocks and sliding back down. They laughed, unconcerned with meaning. The mountain held their laughter as easily as it held silence. Seasons passed, and the mountain changed in ways that were subtle and inevitable. Snow covered its slopes in winter, smoothing every edge. In spring, water traced thin lines down its sides. In summer, heat shimmered above it. In autumn, leaves gathered in quiet layers at its base. Through every change, it remained itself. People began to notice something without quite naming it. The mountain did not resist what touched it. Rain fell, wind pressed, sun warmed, and snow settled. None of it required the mountain to react. It did not stiffen against storms. It did not celebrate clear skies. It allowed each moment to arrive and pass. A traveler once asked a villager, "Why do people sit near that mountain when they are troubled?" The villager thought for a moment and answered, "Because it does not hurry them." Another traveler said, "What does the mountain teach?" The villager smiled slightly. "It does not teach, it remains." Ren returned to the mountain often, though he did not make it a habit he felt bound to. Sometimes he sat, sometimes he walked, sometimes he left quickly. The mountain accepted each visit without preference. Over time, Ren noticed a change in himself. When disagreements arose, his first response softened. He still felt anger, but it moved through him rather than lodging itself deeply. When sadness appeared, he allowed it space without trying to resolve it immediately. He did not become calm in a permanent way. Life continued to shift. But he learned something wordless from the mountain, that not every feeling needs a reaction, and not every moment needs a response. One evening, a storm arrived suddenly. Wind bent the trees. Rain fell hard, flattening the grass. Ren watched from the edge of the village, then walked toward the mountain. The path was slick. The air was sharp. The mountain stood dark and quiet against the moving sky. He stood beneath it, rain soaking his clothes, heart racing. The mountain did not shelter him. It did not block the storm. It allowed the rain to fall. And yet, standing there, Ren felt less shaken. The storm passed as storms do, without explanation. Clouds thinned. Rain slowed. The world breathed again. The mountain remained. As years went on, the village settled. Conflicts arose and faded. Joy appeared and left. Children grew older. Elders grew quieter. The mountain stayed. It became a silent reference point. When things felt overwhelming, people remembered that something could remain unmoved without becoming rigid. That strength did not require force. That presence did not require control. No one built a shrine there. No one named it sacred. They simply respected it in their own way. The mountain did not move for praise. It did not move for blame. It did not move when the world demanded answers. It held its place without effort. Those who spent time near it learned to hold their own place a little more gently. And so, the mountain continues to rise beyond the village, steady and quiet, allowing clouds to gather and disperse, allowing seasons to pass, allowing life to unfold around it. As this story settles, there is nothing you need to imitate. You do not need to become like the mountain. You do not need to be still. Simply knowing that steadiness exists can be enough. The next story will arrive softly when it is time. This fifth story is called The Empty Room with Open Windows. At the edge of a town shaped by quiet routines, there stood an old house that most people passed without noticing. It was not large, and it did not stand out for its beauty. Its walls were plain, its roof weathered, and its paint softened by time. What made it unusual was not how it looked from the outside, but how little it held within. Inside the house, there was a single room. No furniture filled the space. No decorations lined the walls. No objects waited to be used. The floor was clean and bare. The walls were white, touched by light that shifted gently throughout the day. On opposite sides of the room were two wide windows, both always open. Wind moved freely through them, carrying the scent of fields, rain, and distant trees. People who heard about the room often reacted the same way. They asked why it existed at all. What is the purpose of an empty room? They wondered. What could anyone possibly do there? No clear answer was ever given. The room had belonged to a man who once lived alone in the house. He was not known for wisdom or accomplishment. He was known mostly for how lightly he lived. When he left the town many years ago, he took nothing with him. He left the room exactly as it was, and it stayed that way. At first, people avoided the house. An empty room felt strange to them, as though it were unfinished or waiting for something important that never arrived. But over time, curiosity replaced hesitation. One afternoon, a woman named Lian stepped inside. She had lived in the town all her life and carried with her a mind that rarely rested. Her days were filled with tasks that overlapped and responsibilities that crowded one another. Even when she sat down, her thoughts continued standing. She entered the room slowly, unsure of what she expected to find. There was nothing. Sunlight spilled across the floor in a wide, pale shape. A breeze moved the air gently, brushing her face and arms. The room felt open, almost too open, like a thought left unfinished. She stood there for a while, uncertain. Without furniture to guide her, she did not know where to sit. Without objects to look at, her eyes wandered. Without sound, her thoughts felt louder than usual. She nearly turned back. But then she noticed the windows. Through one window, she could see the town. Roofs, trees, the slow movement of people going about their day. Through the other, she could see the fields stretching outward, grasses bending in the wind, clouds passing without urgency. The room held both views without comment. Lian took a step forward, then another. She sat on the floor, feeling its cool steadiness beneath her. At first, her thoughts rushed in, filling the space the room did not. She listed things she needed to do, things she had forgotten, things she worried might happen. The room did nothing. The wind passed through again, lifting a loose strand of her hair. Light shifted across the floor. Outside, a bird crossed the window frame and vanished. Minutes passed. Without realizing it, Lian stopped adding new thoughts to the ones already present. They lingered briefly, then drifted away, replaced by others, which did the same. Eventually, the space between thoughts grew wider. She did not feel calm in a sudden way. She felt spacious. When she stood and left, she did not say anything about the room. But the next week, she returned. Others began to visit as well. A man who carried grief he could not name stood near the window and watched clouds move. A young person, overwhelmed by choices, sat on the floor and stared at the light. An older woman rested against the wall, listening to the wind without trying to understand it. Each person experienced the room differently. Some stayed only a moment. Some stayed an hour. Some came once and never returned. Some returned often. The room never adjusted itself to them. It did not become warmer or colder. It did not become more welcoming or less. It simply remained empty, with open windows, allowing everything else to pass through. People tried to explain its effect. One said, "The room clears the mind." Another said, "The room holds peace." Someone else said, "The room shows you what you bring into it." None of these explanations stayed long. The room did not ask to be defined. One evening, a storm approached the town. Wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain. People hurried home, closing doors and windows against the weather. The empty room's windows remained open. Rain entered, striking the floor lightly, then more steadily. Water gathered in small pools and ran toward the edges of the room. Wind moved through freely, rearranging nothing. When the storm passed, the rain stopped entering. Water slowly evaporated. The floor dried. The room returned to how it had been before, unchanged and unbothered. Those who heard about this shook their heads. "Why leave the windows open?" they asked. "Why not protect the room?" Someone answered quietly, "Because nothing inside needs protecting." Over time, the room became part of the town's quiet knowledge. When people felt crowded by their own thoughts, they sometimes walked there. They did not go to fix themselves. They went to sit in a place that did not ask them to be anything at all. A teacher once brought a small group of students to the room. The students looked around, confused. "Where do we sit?" one asked. "Anywhere," the teacher replied. "What do we do?" another asked. The teacher smiled. "Nothing in particular." The students shifted, unsure. Some whispered, some laughed nervously, some grew bored. Eventually, they fell silent. Not because they were told to, but because there was nothing in the room that needed their reaction. When they left, one student said, "I thought it would be empty, but it wasn't." The teacher did not ask what they meant. The room continued to receive light in the morning, wind in the afternoon, and quiet in the evening. It held warmth when the sun was strong and coolness when night arrived. It did not collect memories. It did not record visits. It offered no answers. Yet people began to notice something subtle in themselves after spending time there. They felt less urgent, less crowded, less certain that every space needed to be filled. They did not become empty. They became open. One man who visited often said, "When I sit there, I realize how much I usually carry without noticing." Another said, "I don't feel lighter, I feel wider." The room did not confirm or deny these observations. It simply stayed. Years passed. The house aged. The town changed. New people arrived who did not know the story of the room. Some stumbled upon it by accident and left puzzled. Others stayed longer, drawn by something they could not name. The windows remained open. They did not invite everything in, yet they did not block anything out. They allowed air, sound, light, and weather to pass freely, trusting that nothing needed to be held. As the town grew louder in some places and quieter in others, the room remained unchanged. It did not compete. It did not retreat. It offered space without explanation. Those who understood it never tried to explain it fully. They knew the room worked best when it was simply allowed to be what it was. An empty room, open windows, nothing added, nothing taken away. As this story settles, you do not need to imagine the room clearly. You do not need to place yourself inside it. Like the space it offers, this story does not ask to be held. Thoughts may pass through. Images may come and go. Nothing needs to stay. The next story will arrive softly when it is time. His story is called The Boat That Drifted Home. At the edge of a wide, slow-moving river, there once stood a small wooden dock. It was nothing remarkable, just a few weathered planks held together by patience and time. The river passed by quietly, reflecting sky and cloud without comment. Most days, the water moved at an even pace, unhurried and unconcerned. Tied loosely to the dock was a boat. It was a simple boat, made for short crossings and gentle travel. Its paint had faded, and its edges were smooth from years of use. A single oar rested inside, though it was not always used. The boat knew the river well. People in the nearby town borrowed it when they needed to cross to the other side. Some rowed carefully, some rushed, some drifted while thinking about other things. The river accepted all of it. At the end of each use, the boat was returned to the dock, its rope looped around a worn post. The knot was never tight. It did not need to be. One evening, as dusk softened the colors of the world, a man named Hao came to the dock. He had lived near the river all his life, yet tonight he felt unfamiliar with himself. The day had carried more weight than he expected. Small efforts had felt heavy. Simple decisions had felt complicated. He untied the boat without much thought and stepped inside. The river welcomed him. Hao held the oar for a while, letting it rest across his knees. He did not row. He did not steer. He allowed the boat to move as the current chose. At first, his mind resisted. He watched the shoreline carefully, noticing how slowly it passed. He wondered if he should guide the boat, if he should choose a direction. The habit of control stirred inside him, restless and familiar. But the river did not wait for his decision. The boat drifted. Water lapped gently against the sides. Reflections stretched and broke, then reformed. The sound of the town faded as distance grew, replaced by quieter things. Insects near the reeds, the soft movement of water around stones. Hao noticed his breathing. Without effort, it slowed. The boat did not ask him where he wanted to go. It did not ask him to decide. It carried him forward without instruction. As the river widened, the current grew smoother. The boat followed it easily, turning slightly when the water turned, slowing when the water slowed. Hao's thoughts arrived in waves. At first, they came thick and fast, unfinished tasks, words left unsaid, questions that circled without landing. He watched them the way he watched the shoreline, passing without holding. The river did not respond to his thoughts. It continued to move. As time passed, the thoughts grew farther apart. Space opened between them. Hao felt a gentle tiredness, the kind that comes not from effort, but from releasing effort. Night arrived without announcement. The sky deepened, the water darkened. Stars appeared, faint at first, then clearer. Their reflections scattered across the river's surface, never staying still long enough to be owned. Hao lay back in the boat, hands resting on his chest. The oar shifted slightly, tapping the side once, then settling. The boat drifted on. He did not know how long he stayed that way. Time felt less like a line and more like a wide field. The river carried him through it without hurry. At some point, the current curved gently. The boat followed, turning without resistance. Hao noticed familiar shapes along the shore: a leaning tree, a cluster of stones, a bend he had known since childhood. The river was bringing him back. He felt no surprise. The boat approached the dock slowly. The rope brushed against the post and caught. The movement softened and stopped. Hao sat up. He stepped onto the dock without effort, as if his body had known exactly when to rise. The boat rested quietly beside him, unchanged. He tied the rope loosely, the way it had always been tied. That night, Hao slept deeply. In the days that followed, he returned to the river often. Sometimes he rowed. Sometimes he drifted. Sometimes he sat at the edge and watched the water move without entering it at all. Others noticed him there and began to join him. A woman who felt overwhelmed by decisions stepped into the boat and let it carry her. A man who had been holding grief too tightly released the oar and lay back, watching the sky. A child climbed in and laughed when the boat turned on its own. Each experience was different. The river did not repeat itself. One morning, the river swelled with rain from the hills. The current moved faster, the surface restless. People wondered if it was wise to use the boat. Hao stepped in anyway. He did not fight the water. He did not demand calm. He allowed the boat to follow the river as it was, not as he wished it to be. The drift felt stronger, less predictable. Yet the boat remained steady, responding to the current with quiet intelligence. Hao's body adjusted naturally. His breath found a rhythm. When the river eventually softened again, the boat returned as it always did. Word spread quietly about the boat, though no one claimed it held magic. People spoke of it simply. "It carries you," one said. "It brings you back," another said. "It doesn't rush," said a third. No one argued. The boat did not promise direction. It did not guarantee arrival. It only offered movement without struggle. Over time, the dock grew more worn. The post leaned a little more. The boat's paint faded further. Nothing about it became more impressive. And yet, people kept coming. They came when they were tired of deciding. They came when effort felt heavy. They came when they needed to feel carried rather than moving. The river accepted all of them. How aged quietly. His hair grayed. His steps slowed. Still, he visited the river, sometimes only to sit and listen. One evening, a visitor asked him, "Why does the boat always come back?" How thought for a moment. "Because it belongs to the river," he said, "and the river knows the way home." The visitor nodded, not fully understanding, and that was enough. As seasons turned, the river rose and fell. Leaves gathered and scattered. Ice formed and melted. Through it all, the boat remained, drifting when untied, resting when returned. It did not cling to movement. It did not resist stillness. Those who learned from it did not speak of surrender as something dramatic. They spoke of it as something ordinary, like lying back when tired, like floating when the water is strong, like trusting that movement does not always require force. The boat did not remove choice. It simply showed that choice does not always need to be used. As this story settles, there is nothing you need to follow. Like the boat on the river, awareness can drift. Like the river, time can move without being counted. The final story will arrive gently when it is time. This story is called When the Moon Finally Rested on Water. There was a lake hidden among low hills, far from any road that hurried. It did not appear on maps, not because it was secret, but because nothing depended on finding it. Those who came upon it did so slowly, often without planning, as if their steps had been guided by something quieter than intention. The lake was wide and calm. Its surface stretched outward like a held breath. Reeds gathered along its edges. Stones rested beneath the water, visible on clear days, invisible on others. The lake accepted both without concern. At night, the moon often rose above the hills and cast its light across the water. Sometimes the reflection appeared smooth and complete. Other times, wind disturbed the surface, breaking the moon into fragments that scattered and rejoined again. People who passed by noticed this. Some stood at the shore and waited for the water to become still, hoping to see the moon clearly. Others arrived when the wind was strong and left disappointed, believing they had missed something important. The lake did not respond. Near the lake lived an old caretaker named Shen. He did not own the land. He did not guard it. He simply lived nearby, tending to a small garden and repairing what needed mending. When asked about the lake, he spoke little. "It reflects what it reflects," he would say. Visitors sometimes asked Shen how to see the moon properly. "Should we wait for the wind to stop?" they asked. "Should we come at a different hour? Is there a better place to stand?" Shen listened patiently, then answered in the same quiet way. "The lake does not hold the moon," he said. "The moon does not hurry to be held." Most visitors did not understand and moved on. One evening, a woman named May arrived at the lake. She had traveled far, though she no longer remembered why she began. Her journey had stretched longer than planned, filled with pauses, turns, and moments of doubt. She carried tiredness in her body and a longing she could not name. She sat at the water's edge as night arrived. The moon rose slowly, pale and steady. Wind moved lightly across the lake, breaking the reflection into wavering shapes. May watched, feeling a familiar tightening in her chest. She wanted the water to be still. She wanted the moon to settle. She wanted the reflection to be clear. She waited. Minutes passed. The wind continued. The reflection shifted endlessly. May felt disappointment rise, then frustration. She stood, paced briefly, then sat again. Shen watched from a distance but did not approach. May returned night after night. Sometimes the lake was calm, sometimes it was restless. Each time she watched closely, hoping to witness the moment when the moon would finally rest perfectly on the water. On calm nights, the reflection appeared complete, but May found herself uneasy. She worried it would vanish. She watched too carefully, holding her breath, afraid the slightest movement might disturb it. On windy nights, she felt discouraged and restless, certain that peace was always just out of reach. One night, exhausted, May stopped trying. She sat down, wrapped her arms loosely around herself, and let her gaze soften. She did not search the water. She did not judge the wind. She simply allowed the night to be as it was. The moon rose. The water moved. The reflection appeared and disappeared. And something inside her loosened. She realized she had been waiting for the lake to give her something it was never meant to give. The lake was not a mirror meant to be controlled. It was a living surface, responding naturally to what touched it. The moon did not wait for stillness. The water did not owe her clarity. In that moment, May felt the weight of effort slip away. Her breathing slowed. Her shoulders dropped. She leaned back slightly, feeling the ground beneath her. The moon continued to shine, whether reflected clearly or not. Shen approached quietly and sat a short distance away. "You look tired," he said gently. "I am," May replied. "I've been waiting for the right moment." Shen nodded. The right moment often arrives when we stop waiting. They sat in silence. The wind eased slightly. The lake's surface softened, not completely still, but calm enough. The moon's reflection gathered itself gently, forming and dissolving in slow rhythms. May did not rush to look. She felt something different now. Not satisfaction, not relief, but acceptance. Whether the moon rested clearly or not felt less important. She understood then. The moon had always been resting on the water. It was her grasping that had disturbed the surface. From that night on, May visited the lake without expectation. She came when she felt restless. She came when she felt quiet. She came when she felt nothing at all. Sometimes the reflection was clear. Sometimes it was broken. Sometimes clouds hid the moon entirely. Each time, the lake remained. Others arrived too. A man burdened by regret watched the moon scatter across the water and felt his own thoughts loosen. A young woman, afraid of uncertainty, sat through a windy night and found herself strangely comforted by the movement. An old couple rested together, holding hands, watching reflections form and fade without comment. No one tried to fix the lake anymore. They learned to sit with it. Shen continued his quiet tending. When visitors asked questions, he answered simply, if at all. "The moon does not need the water," he said once. "The water does not need the moon." Seasons passed. In winter, ice formed along the edges of the lake, cracking softly at night. The moon reflected faintly through the frozen surface, blurred and gentle. In spring, rain filled the lake, and reflections wavered freely. In summer, insects danced across the water, creating endless ripples. In autumn, leaves floated briefly, then sank. Through all of it, the moon rose and set. May's journey ended without an ending. She did not leave the lake with answers. She left with space. She no longer searched for perfect stillness. She no longer believed peace required control. She learned that clarity appears naturally when grasping softens, and disappears naturally when grasping returns. Neither state was wrong. The lake never held the moon. It never needed to. It simply allowed reflection to happen when conditions were right, and allowed distortion when they were not. One quiet night, Shen noticed May resting by the shore, eyes closed, breathing slow and even. The moon was high. The water was calm, but she did not look. She was already at rest. As this final story settles, nothing more needs to arrive. There is no final moment to wait for, no reflection to hold. Like the moon and the lake, awareness and rest meet naturally when effort loosens. You have listened long enough. Thank you for being here, whether awake or asleep. Thank you for allowing these stories to pass through you. There is nothing more to do now. The night can carry you the rest of the way.